Welcome to another free webinar, the first webinar for 2025. And we want to talk about this one, if I can point correctly, it's backwards for me, mirrored, the product manager career path. So we want to talk about everything from associate product manager all the way out to chief product officer. We're going to talk about some of the roles, trying to get into product. We'll talk about some like adjacent roles, some other career opportunities and paths that are available to you outside of that, just traditional product career ladder. And then I also want to talk about context, because organizational size matters. So I want to spend some time talking about how organizational size has an impact onto roles and some of the considerations you probably want to have around your own career and what type of role you want to kind of go into next. I've got a lot to cover. Like all the content I probably wanted to talk about this on this topic is like probably 2 hours plus of content. So I've had to cut it down. I want to try and stick to time as much as possible so we can do questions, because I think the biggest advantage of joining live to these things is really to get into the questions and be able to answer those things. So happy for you to throw questions in as we go. I'll keep an eye on the chat, but we'll reserve some time at the end for questions for sure. So let's just get into it, because I got a lot to cover. I tried to do slides for this and I actually was struggling. And I found the best way to facilitate this is actually to keep this a little bit more organic. So we're going to kind of like post a note and talk and chalk, as they say. So if we think about the career, maybe I'll just do this, right? We'll start with this post-it note. We'll start with product manager. All right. So when I say product PM, we'll spell it out. Why not? I mean product manager, not project manager, not some other variation of it, right? So product manager role. It's like, how do you start your career? How do you get into product management? And for some companies, they have what is known as an associate product manager type role. This often gets abbreviated. You'll see a lot of acronyms. People like to use their acronyms. I'll hopefully try and spell things out and not give you acronyms. If I forget something, just ask the question, please. So associate product manager role. This is not that common. This is particularly it's an entry-level product manager role is the intent. It's definitely inside like big kind of product tech companies that want to invest in the career and that type of stuff. They definitely have it. And that's really largely where it's kind of concentrated to. So I think some of them give different titles to it. I believe Meta calls it like their rotational product manager role. But I like to... Well, I mean, I'm seeing this become more and more popular. I hope to see this continue to become more and more popular. I hope to see more companies adopt this. And the intent behind this is like, it's a bit of a like apprenticeship into products. So the intent is like, you come into this role, you do an associate product manager role for like a year, 2 years. You have a lot of support. There's like a lot of there's a lot of structure around it. And it's to help you really grow into a product manager role. Now, they often take like either recent university graduates or college graduates, people who've done MBAs, especially for companies like Google and Meta and stuff. They look at those types of people, but they also take people who've maybe been working in the workforce in another role for like the last couple of years. But as I mentioned, this is really isolated. It's quite rare. You don't see it that often. And some of you might be quite far into your career that it doesn't really make sense to go into this, because there's an element of like remuneration or pay and things like that. So for everybody else or the rest of the world, we kind of are accidental product managers, and we come from all kinds of backgrounds. I'm gonna list out a few that are like common backgrounds. It'll be interesting if you shared your background too, for those listening in the chat if you really want to. But these are some really common ones, and they're common because there's overlap with the role. So business analyst is a logical one. Product marketing is also one, or marketing in general, I should say. Product design is another one where people come from. Of course, we've got engineering as part of that. We have project management even. Now, all of these have their pros and cons. Delivery management, if we want to throw that in there. There's probably like Scrum Master type roles, or Agile if we're going down that fence, and etc. Now, this is not exhaustive, right? So I'm not trying to do like, this is the only way to get into product. And was going to do these arrows, but there might be way too many arrows for me to do. But you get my point. Like all these are kind of leading in there. Now, these roles are pretty common because there's a pretty common overlap there. There's pros and cons to it, right? So if you are in one of these roles trying to break into product, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I want to go into the rest of the career. Obviously, you're going to have strengths. You're going to have strengths either from like a marketing, go-to-market side, launch side, or from an analytical side, or from like a delivery side, or from a design experience side. And they all come with their pros and cons. What you need to do is work out what gaps you have and really try and bridge those gaps. And hopefully you have some support there. We'll get more into that. But focusing on the rest, because the rest is probably what we're interested in. The next step is obviously senior product manager, right? So you basically are a product manager typically for a couple of years. Now this is really context dependent. This is dependent on your organization. It's dependent on you. Like how much do you invest in your career? I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time on like how many years and stuff. If you ask some questions around that, maybe we can cover it in the Q&A, but I don't want to get bogged down there. I also can't spend enough, like we don't have time to go through all the nuances between like different skills and what would be expected, like a whole competency framework. You can Google competency frameworks. Some companies have public product, like their product management competency framework. So feel free to do that. Maybe I'll do another webinar on that if it's of interest to people. But really the primary difference to keep it at like a 10,000 foot kind of level is that you're being recognized for your seniority. Like you've been a product manager for a couple of years, you're growing your craft, you're becoming better at the craft. And you generally, as you move up in seniority and you become like a senior product manager, you'll be given broader scope, more responsibility. So like a more difficult product, a more complex product, maybe one that's like the breadwinner for the company. Like it's the one that often the case, there's some type of product line or business line that generates around 70% of a company's revenue unless they're extremely diversified. But that's the type of stuff that you would end up working on as opposed to a product manager. But really, you're doing the same thing. You're just a bit more senior and we have higher expectations from you. Now, this is where you get into a bit of a fork in the road. And I'm just going to map all this out and then we're going to get deeper into the nuance. So the next step from one of the next steps, there's a fork in the road, we'll get into this, is like principal product manager. Now, this is where the fork in the road happens. And this is where we often refer to this as the individual contributor. Contributor? Oh. And you will hear this get referred to as the acronym IC. So some of you might hear that get thrown around, IC. That is what they mean by it. But this is where we have this individual contributor path. Now, this is not super common in companies. I'll kind of get deeper into that in a minute. But there is, in some companies, there's a full career path along here. Like some of them will have like distinguished product manager, and what did I miss? The U in that, vowels. Some of them will then have like a staff PM. I think Google call it like fellow PM or something like that. But anyways, there's like a whole career, like there's a whole, depending on how big your company is, we'll get into that nuance in a minute, but there's several steps inside this. This is the same as that senior product manager, from product manager to senior product manager. This is you being rewarded and remunerated. So normally this comes with pay increases, all that type of stuff. It comes with increased responsibility. Usually you will have more complex product spaces. You'll work on more strategic work, all that type of stuff. And if you think about it, like why this even exists too is, do I want to put my junior people on like really important products and like really risky and complex products? No, I don't. I want to give them a space where they can grow and they can learn and they can succeed by minimizing the impact to the business. So that's why we have this difference in seniority. Now it's a fork in the road because the other option for people is the people leadership path, right? Or people management. I'll call it people management and then brackets product leadership. Now, this one pretty much every company has, except for maybe a small startup. Not every company has this individual contributor path. Now, the most common next step, depending on how big your company is in the people management one, is it starts at like group product manager, Then it kind of goes to like director of product. Sometimes this is referred to as like head of product, depending on the titles. I tend to find director more popular in the US area, head of more popular in like Europe, and Australia just has a weird mix of the two. Then you have like VP of product normally, and then CPO at the end. Now, not every company has all these like all of these, because it depends on how big the company is. Did that annoying thing. Anyways, so we refer to this as a dual track career path. Not every company has it, but companies that often have like associate product manager roles, because they understand the value of product and they want to give like a good career ladder for people and options for people, would have this, which is the dual track. So we have this individual contributor track, and then we have this people management track. Now, the reason why this has become a thing, now I understand not every company has it, but the reason why companies have decided to go down this path is because of the Peter Principle. If anyone's heard of the Peter Principle, in fact, I'm just going to throw the Wikipedia link into chat if you want to read about it. But basically, who was it? I'm going to read it on it. Lawrence J. Peter. He wrote this little short book, and he basically described this observation that he had in companies where people, as he framed it, will rise to a level of incompetence. Another way to frame this is this. I'm like, hey, senior product manager, you're an amazing product manager. You're like our best PM. Like, you're so awesome. So as a reward for being so awesome, I'm going to make you the manager of all these other product managers. And here's the kicker. Some people who are amazing product managers aren't amazing people leaders, because people management is another skill. That is a skill in its own. And the irony behind all this is we take someone who's, really good at product management and they are contributing greatly to the organization, and we put them into a role where they have less impact. We pay them more for less impact. And if anything, if they're really bad at the people management side, they could make all the other people that they're responsible for even less impactful too. So it's like a lose, because you pay them more money too. So what a lot of companies have done, now this is not popular, like this is not widespread. This is not the fact in every company. Like your company may not have this, and that's super common, unfortunately. But what companies have realized is that this doesn't make sense. So why can't I give this person a career path? Why can't I reward them and pay them for their contributions? They're increasing contribution to the organization, and I can just kind of leave them doing what they do best. And then what I want to do is I want to identify the senior product people who are good product managers, but they have the aptitude and the skills to be great people managers and product leaders as well. And I want to put those people into these people management roles, and I want to leave the people who are great individual contributors as individual contributors. Now, there was a question around, I'm going to just throw it up, around IC roles and responsibilities. This will vary from company, but typically what starts to change, just to give the 10,000 foot thing, because I don't have the time to get into everything because I want to cover a few things. Typically, the difference is like you're still a product manager. You still do product management. So like there's an element that there's some things don't really change between here and here. Like you're still managing a product, you're still doing discovery, you're still, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the difference comes in what you're doing it on. So like these people, I'm going to put them on like the really strategic stuff, the really complex stuff. Maybe it's like a 0 to 1, a new product that we're going to like bet the company on. I'm not going to put a junior person on it. I'm going to put a senior person on it. And their day-to-day will look different, but that's because they're more senior. They might do different things because they're just more experienced. So they're not trying to follow like a playbook. They're bending the rules and they're working out what makes sense for that context. And they're really driving impact as a result of that. Now, there is some nuances. There are some differences. Usually once you get up to like these levels, we start to expect these people to also play a role in coaching and mentoring some of the junior people. we also would expect them to contribute to the craft, right? So like if we are trying to like grow more product people and have better product practices in the organization, I would expect these people to be those people that are like, hey, this works really well and don't do that. And this, let's experiment with this new way of working. And how does that work? In some organizations, as you move up this ladder, they also have like a public facing expectation. So we sometimes have distinguished product managers and stuff, speak at conferences and have to write and do things publicly for the company. And the reason why we do that is because we need to attract talent, right? As product leaders, we've got to attract talent. So sometimes you get those people to also do that because they're really good at telling, they got good skills. They've got good storytelling skills. They're good speakers and communicators, and they can help assist there. But a lot of that nuance is going to depend on the organization, but that's usually kind of the difference there between, like, say, a senior product manager and as you move up into these ladders. So hopefully that helps at a 10,000 foot level. Cool. So we get into, and so then the thing that I want to say on all this is how many levels a company has is very dependent on the company size. I'm mapping out like all of them so you can see like a full thing, but you would only have all of this in like a really large enterprise. In a small startup, you might just have a product manager and then like a head off, right? Like that might be your startup is product manager, head off, founder. In a medium-sized enterprise, you might start to have these roles as well, where you might have, senior, you could go principal, you could go group, and then maybe it's not head off, it's actually like CPO when the company starts to grow. And then you start to layer on and layer on and layer on as companies get bigger. Now, that's just something to consider in that, and also the fact that not every company has individual contributors. So just to pause on this one, I think a reflection point here too is like, do you want to stay with a practitioner and in the craft? If so, you're going to hit a ceiling here, or you're going to have to find a company that has an individual contributor path. And then the other thing is like, is people management for me? Some companies are great, just to throw this in here, where they recognize this fork in the path exists. And as a senior product manager, they might start to give you some exposure to this side of the fence so you can start to see whether that's what you want to do. And I know some people who have really bounced between these, right? Like they've been, group product manager and then a principal PM and then back to group product manager. And so you can always bounce between them as well. Now, this is the lay of the land, but this isn't everything. We have some emergent things going on too. Product ops is one of them, right? So product ops, you could come from, just to paint this picture, you could come from anywhere into product ops, anywhere from senior product manager. I say that because just like people management, whilst it is a different skill, you still have product leadership responsibility, and it still expects you to be good at the product craft because I expect you to also coach these people. And because of that, you can't be a terrible product manager and be a great product leader. You can be a good product manager and a great product leader. You don't need to be the best product manager to be a great product leader, if that makes sense. Similarly with product ops, I think you need to be pretty good at the craft. And there's a few reasons for that. Like I think product ops, and this is my view on product ops, if you do product ops really well, it's not about just rolling out tools and processes, right? It's about taking that product mindset and you're basically the problem space that you own from a product ops perspective is you own making product and doing product in the organization more effective. So if you're a really good product ops manager, you would be spending a lot of time. You would see all the product teams, basically everyone in the organization, you'll see all of them as your customers and your users. And you should be spending time interviewing them, observing product teams, understanding what their pain points are, what challenges there are, what areas or opportunities exist for efficiencies and, to bring things together. And then you'll go and find processes, tools, playbooks, frameworks, culture even, that can help change that. Because then that's the solution to those problems. And this is the reason why I see it as a senior role. It's not a process thing. It's not like, hey, roll out these tools for us. And as a result of that, in order to apply the product craft to a problem space like that, like you've got to be pretty senior. You've got to be able to be able to take that playbook and start to mend it and bend it for that context. So product ops is one of them. You've also got like product coaching. Obviously, that's what I do today. I chose this career path because the part of this role that I love is the coaching and the people side, like watching people grow, and also these people, although they need less coaching on the product craft. And to be honest, just to touch on this, because I think it's important, these people are generally going to be better at the product craft than you as a product leader in here. Not always, because you could be like a really good product manager as well. But you would be very ignorant and naive to not, if you're in this role, to not leverage these people. Like, good product leaders go to their most senior product people and they get advice, they get help, like, help me with this strategy, help me with this, what do you think about this? That is how that dynamic should play out. So, and these people generally get pulled in at the highest levels for advice and help and support. So, but product coaching is one of them. I like the variety of working with different companies. I like the coaching side, the people side. With that said, obviously I'm independent. I run my own business now, but there is more and more companies, especially large companies, that are realizing the need for this or the value of it. And I am seeing product coaching roles, and some of these places have been like my clients. I have seen more and more product coaching roles come about inside companies. So some companies have started to opt for having a product coach or a product coaching team inside their company. Obviously, that's a very big scale for that to be true. There's obviously like consulting, even like management consulting as part of that. And there's a whole bunch that probably goes around there. But other things that are available to you as well, if we jump on this side of the fence, which is the product leadership side of the fence, obviously we have things like general management. Like you could move from director off to like a general manager off. Obviously CEO is one, and obviously founder is one as well. There's a lot of overlap between running a product line and running a business line, or running a company or founding a company. So a lot of overlap there. I coach a lot of founders as well. So there's a lot of overlap there. Another option that's available to you is you could move like sideways into design, into delivery management if you really wanted to. Maybe you thought, you know what, product's not for me, engineering, etc., marketing as well. But there's a lot of lateral movements that can happen there. This is like a bit of a map thing of what options that are available there. I do want to get into some more nuances, because all of this changes when we start to overlay company size. So if we overlay company size, if we think about, I'm going to switch to my iPad and start drawing here. Companies kind of go through, tend to find companies are they're like products in this regard. They have their own kind of curve. And what I mean by that is companies kind of start to scale, and then they kind of mature and they start to optimize and mature, which is like and if we were to overlay that with like labels that we give these companies, we often call these startups. Sometimes we call these like scale ups, but also I think this is a spectrum of scale ups all the way up to like small and medium enterprises. And then we also have large enterprises. I'll do large enterprises. So not only do you need to consider, this is why I'm talking about this. Not only do you need to consider whether like, do I want to be an individual contributor? Do I want to go into product leadership and people management, where, you know, you start to have people management responsibility as well as like strategy responsibility. But not only do you need to consider this whole puzzle, you also need to consider like industry, and you need to consider like organizational size, because this is very different. So if we zoom in to startup, as a startup, one of the big things that is going to be the case as a product manager in there is obviously you could be the first product manager and then there's like the founder. So you need to also consider this. This means that you're going to be kind of doing 0 to 1. It's going to be pretty chaotic. You're going to have to wear many hats. In a startup, you are tight on money. You might not have designers. I coached a product manager. She was a senior product manager in a large company. She joined a startup. They didn't have a designer. Guess who's doing the designs? You are. Do they have marketing people? No. Guess who's doing the marketing? You're doing it. So you're kind of doing multiple roles and you're doing many different things. Some people love that. Some people don't. You're kind of chasing product market fit. That was not written in a good spot. You own, so one of the pros in this, if I go pro, is that you own the whole product. My pen. So you kind of, I should have just drawn that. You own the whole product. So it's like, it's you sometimes. Or maybe there's like a head off if it's big enough, but typically it's very flat. You own the whole thing, which means that there's a huge amount of autonomy. Admittedly, if the founder can give you that autonomy, but you own that whole product. This gives you a lot of responsibility, but a lot of autonomy. If the company does well, obviously there's a growth aspect. There's potentially equity into it as well. But the negative sides of all of this is obviously the chaotic part. I think that's a negative. For some people actually like that. This founder PM dynamic can be a negative as well. This can be tricky to navigate, to manage. Those things are going to be different. You can also be by yourself. So like no support. There's a lot of product managers I coach, do one-on-one coaching with, part of the product mentorship and product pathways that are kind of in this space where they don't have the support because you're kind of by yourself. There's no one to bounce ideas off. You don't have a senior person who could be coaching you and helping you grow. So whilst there's growth opportunity in terms of career and titles, there isn't always in terms of like craft. At least you need to kind of get that externally. So those things are some of the challenges that you need to kind of think about when it comes to being in a startup. Now, when you move up to scale ups and you start to move in this small, medium enterprise world, it gets a little better, but startups still have growing pains. They're still very chaotic because you're focused on scale. You're no longer 0 to 1, although you could be doing 0 to 1 products in that space, but you're kind of trying to 10x stuff. And there's a whole bunch of growing pains. You go from one product manager to multiple product managers. You might start to get support, which is great. You can hire those designers, you can hire marketing, but that support stuff kind of comes at a cost, which is now we have like this roles and responsibilities challenge. We have like process challenges. We have like alignment challenges where it was easy when we were like 30 people, but now we're like 100 people. We need to kind of try to align and dependencies start to increase. And these things all start to happen. You also start to move away from owning the whole product to just part of the product, but you still own like a decent slice, and you can kind of see that impact is a part of that. All right, part of product. Now, some of the pros are similar to a startup. You've got growth as part of it. You could have equity still, but not as much equity. You start to have that support. You start to have those specialist type roles that come into it. You can start to have like coaching, that network of people around you can help you grow, those types of things. And the company's still small enough that like access to like founders and the board is still pretty easy. The company still feels small and nimble. You still got a decent amount of autonomy, even though there are dependencies. You still feel like you can move fast, but there are a lot of growing pains and challenges around all of that. Going all the way up to a large enterprise now, one of the big shifts that happen here is that you start to own quite a small piece of the puzzle. And to make this real, like what I mean by that is, can't spell. What I mean by that is if you thought about like let's say an e-commerce website, right? In a startup, it's you own that whole product. You are responsible for it. You are driving success for it. When you start to grow and scale, that e-commerce could be, and I might draw it here, it might be broken up into like, this could be like the browsing, like searching for an item. This could be like the actual item pages and inventory management or something. And then this could be like paying or checkout, right? So now it's like rather than one product manager, you've got three, and then you might have that head off or group product manager or something, or CPO that kind of goes over the top of all of that. Then when you get into a large enterprise, you might get all the way down to like you might start to own the search inside browse, right? Like it could just be just the search. Like, and it could even be like search on this part on this screen. So things start to get kind of really, really small and narrow. But the plus side to that is impact can be really large. So I want to give you a real example of this. And also the scale of the role can be very large. There was a senior product manager I worked with and I coached. When she was in a large enterprise, her P&L, so her product line generated around $20 million a year in revenue for the business. $20 million. Senior product manager managing $20 million. When she moved to a startup and she took a head off role, the startup did 7 figures. So it was like single millions, not double millions, right? So like say $7 million in annual recurring revenue. So she was managing something that was triple in size from a revenue perspective and probably from a customer perspective than the whole startup that she joined. So this is something that you can kind of like have to consider between all of this. The big benefits in a large enterprise is stability. So like you're not worried about the startup going under next week. There's obviously a lot of support. You get access to maybe even product coaching. You got budget. You've got lots of people around you, lots of like really smart people. That individual contributor path is often quite reserved to large enterprises. So that path is kind of only really, not only, but you're kind of going that way if that's the path that you want to go down. I think mobility too is a big one. The nice thing with a large enterprise is that they have many products and all the products are doing like at different stages of the life cycle. They're doing brand new stuff, 0 to 1 stuff. They're doing like mature stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So you can move around and you can actually kind of get this, if the company can encourage mobility, hopefully they do, and hopefully you have a good product leader that does, then you can kind of get more rounded skills as a product manager. So this is something to really think about, that you can get exposure to things that you might not get exposure to in other spaces. Now, of course, if anyone's worked in a large enterprise, there's a bunch of downsides to it. Obviously, like dependencies is like a big one. Obviously, they can feel slow, can feel bureaucratic with politics. It could lack innovation because of the innovator's dilemma. It could, what else could there be? They like work in progress is really high. All the alignment issues that we have in scale ups. And obviously your exposure to say senior leaders and stuff could be very limited because the company's so big. So all those things are things that you need to consider as part of it. But obviously if it's individual contributor path, the large enterprise side of the fence. Now I've already kind of, 2 last things before we get into the questions. I kind of already alluded to this, but with that example that I gave of that senior product manager. But what this means is that these roles and these titles can be very different in different organization sizes. So what I mean by that is a head of product in a small startup, your scope, your responsibility can be smaller than a senior product manager in a large enterprise. And this is why we get this like dynamic that happens where people go from a head of product at a startup and then they join a large enterprise and they're like a product manager or a senior product manager. And it looks weird, like it's a step backwards, but it's not a step backwards. It's kind of a horizontal step. Sometimes it could be a step up depending on the companies, but that's why we start to get this happening. So you might see people, and some of them might be you, where you've gone from senior product manager to like a director of product at a startup, and then back to being a senior product manager, and then back to being, director of product at a startup, and then maybe a principal PM at a larger company. And that's why this dynamic exists. The good news is most people who have worked in product for a while, they understand this, they know this, and they don't see, like, they're not looking at your resume like, why did you take a demotion or something like that? They understand this dynamic. So that's the good news. Obviously, not everyone understands that, but that's something to it's something to consider, that if you're a head of product in a startup and you're trying to land a head of or a VP product in a large enterprise, don't be surprised if you're having a lot of difficulty doing that, because the breadth and the responsibility can be really large. Also, title inflation is a real thing. I'm sure you've seen people who are like, I'm the CPO, and they're in a startup and they're really just the first product hire and they don't have any direct reports or anything like that. So those things also exist. The last thing I want to touch on, which is the elephant in the room, which maybe none of you care about, but I figured it's probably it, is product ownership. You probably noticed I hadn't talked about that at all up until now. And the reason for this, I've got a whole article, which I can throw in the chat, of my take on this, which you can read. I'll throw it in there, which is the long version of what I'm going to say. But really, this is very dependent on companies. I've seen a lot of companies where these are the same thing. They've just used a different title. And some of those companies are because they were influenced by Agile. So Agile came in, they did Agile transformation. I've been part of those. I've also have a lot of clients that this is the case. And then they'll retitle it. I've helped clients do that. Sometimes they don't, they just keep the title, but really they're one and the same. In other organizations, it's a different role, and it kind of sits down here next to all these ones. And it's like, it's an avenue into product management. In some places, it's actually seen as like the associate product manager role, or like a junior product manager, and it's part of this career path. Very dependent on the organization. You need to really look at the job description, kind of suss it out. Unfortunately, that is the case, but yeah, very context dependent. So I want to touch on that one. Cool. Stay on for questions, because I think there's a few good questions and it's good to actually go through them. I have launched a product mentorship. I'm going to run the first workshop as part of the product mentorship. I'm going to do it on skills. So I actually want to get deeper into this topic, actually go into the different skills, go through like the competency framework, go through how do you set a career goal. So that's the other thing I wanted to share, was a career goal framework, which I'll pull up in a second, which I'll share the link with you as well, that you can think about it. But as part of the launch, because I only just launched it this year, I'm still giving $200 off the product mentorship. You can use the code MENTOR200. Go to productpathways.com/mentorship. Go check that out. It's going to give you access to all of the self-paced courses, to a private coaching community, to coaching, to access to me, where we're going to run workshops, like I mentioned. You can network, all that type of stuff. So I wanted to mention that before we get into comments and questions, I should say. And let me just share this really quickly. So, and I'll share the link as well for this. This is a career goal statement that I came up with because I do a lot of coaching on this. If you are trying to think about what that next career step is for you, I would have loved to walk you through this, but we just don't have time. As you can see, there's so much. And I want to get through questions because there's a lot more context here. The good news is there's a bunch of examples, real examples of people I've coached in the past. There's also a video of me explaining it all. So I'll share that link. You can watch that video and please use it. Hopefully it's helpful. What you notice as part of this is what I just talked about, is like there's the role you want, and then there's also at what company. And what you'll see in the examples is like at your current company, because that's very different than a new company. But you also see things like Where's like the startup one? Like here, like, because again, a big company versus a startup are very different things, right? So this one is one that probably needs more refinement because a VP of product at a big corporation is very different than a VP of product in a startup. In fact, you might struggle to find a VP of product role in a startup because they just don't have so many layers. So yeah. All right, questions. So John asked, where do I put growth PMs? Yeah, so let me go back to this mirror board. Growth. I see growth, just like with product ops and stuff, growth is like another specialization. But I also see growth like the same as this trajectory, right? So what's a better way to describe this? Okay, you can have a growth product manager, you can have a senior growth product manager, you can have a principal growth one. You see where I'm going with this? You could have again, director of growth. So I put growth like that. It's like it is a variation of product management, and it is like, it's kind of like a specialization. And you could say the same with product ops, can go over that. Although I think product ops has a ceiling where eventually product ops would report to some product leader at some stage. You can't see that arrow, that's terrible because of all my drawings. Whereas growth can go all the way to like the top in a way, or even here. I haven't seen product ops get big enough that it has like VP of ops or something like that. So that's where I would put the differentiation between them. And the reason why I do this as well is because here's another one, platform product management. However, for me, I would put platform product management here, start in here, and then it could also go up. Like you could become a senior product manager that owns a platform. The difference here is like you're a product manager who is good at growth, or you're a product manager who is kind of like owning a platform and you're kind of specializing in managing that platform. I put platform as senior because platforms are hard. They're really complex and hard, and you want to put senior people on it. So that's how I think about growth. That's how I think about platform and stuff. So hopefully, John, that answers the question. If it doesn't, let me know. Carson asked, do you think working in a product role will help you grow the skills necessary to start a startup? Absolutely, yes. That's why I put founder in here. There's a big overlap between the roles. Like product role is going to help you build the skills, not all the skills to start a company. I'll tell you some of the stuff that I've had to really heavily index on and invest on myself now running my own businesses. Product craft has helped me with the product side of the fence, thinking about value propositions, discovery, trying to understand what resonates with the market, what people care about, that type of stuff, being able to actually build a product, even though a lot of my stuff is services, not products. But the stuff that I know that I have gaps in is sales, marketing, distribution type stuff. Although distribution, I've been fortunate of two things I've been fortunate about. I've been fortunate that I've worked on a lot of 0 to 1 products. So distribution, go-to-market, launch stuff, I'm familiar with. I've still invested a lot into my own learning and growing in that space since then. But I've been fortunate that I've worked on 0 to 1 products. Second piece of the puzzle I've been fortunate about is I've also done product pricing. I've been responsible for pricing, had P&L responsibility. So that side of the fence, the finance side, pricing a product, that I've had some exposure to. I know not everyone has those experiences. That's why I mentioned it. But those things, if you don't have that experience, I'd be indexing on. But marketing, sales, distribution, that side of the fence has been really heavy for me. And probably some elements around operations too. There's just some logistics operation side that you need to deal with. But the rest of the stuff, discovery, trying to find value propositions that work, being able to iterate a product in market, being able to find product market fit, being able to scale that product, those types of things, pricing, that type of stuff, have all been great skills that are transferable across. If that's a path you're considering, I would highly recommend trying to get a product role in a startup. So don't try and do product in a large enterprise. Large enterprise product is not going to help. Well, it will help you. It's not useless, but it's very different when you don't have all the people, funds, etc. You're doing 0 to 1, not working on a mature product, etc., etc. So if you can get a product role in a startup, that's going to set you up for the best success, in my opinion, or give you the best exposure to some of the nuances and the things that you're going to have to deal with as a product manager in a startup. That could be quite different than a large enterprise. A large enterprise, you could be like really pure playbook, insert whatever book you read, versus a startup where you need to be extremely pragmatic, extremely resourceful, scrappy. That'd be my tip. This is worth touching. Thank you, Mo. So Mo said, like, moving from a large company to a medium-sized one at the same level, seniority level, goal is to have a salary increase. And then I think you had the follow-up, which was like, so how to communicate that in a proper way during interviews. So this is something that's worth touching on, because typically as you go down in organizational scale, I didn't touch on this when we talked about it, salary goes down, unfortunately. Enterprises, I've seen there are some people in large enterprises, particularly like, in the Bay Area and the big Silicon Valley tech companies, that are on monstrous remuneration packages, like $500,000 type stuff, right? Like crazy money. Smaller companies just don't have that money. They're just not making enough money revenue per employee. They're just not there yet. Or they do make a high enough revenue per employee ratio, but they're prioritizing that money on something else because they're growing. So when you're growing as a company, you want to keep all the capital as possible, and you want to reallocate that capital into growth. You don't want to spend it. So unfortunately, as you move down into startups, you tend to take a pay cut. That's not always the case, depending on what salary you're on already, but that's something to be mindful of. You can take a very cruisy product role in a large enterprise on a higher salary. And this is why, like, you can go from a head off in a small company to a senior product manager in a large company and take a large pay rise because of that dynamic. In terms of communicating that in interviews, if this is a non-negotiable to you, just say it as a non-negotiable. Like, say what your salary expectations are, and just be non-negotiable about that. Just be like, I want to earn X amount, and you don't always have to explain yourself, right? But if you do explain yourself, you just say, well, that's what I'm on today, and that's what I hope to get, right? Like, that's my non-negotiable thing. And I would just be very clear upfront about it. It's better to be upfront and clear, and for them to say, well, sorry, we can't pay you that, and for you to move on and go interview at another company. And I think this is just a good practice anyway. It's about clear communication type thing. So I would just be, and it will feel awkward and it's probably going to be really uncomfortable, but the more times you do it, it'll be more comfortable. And don't be afraid. I think, like, you don't want to get through the whole process and then say it, and then, like, they're like, oh, sorry, I can't pay you that, and then you're back at square one. You might as well say it early on and get through it. Normally places will ask you these types of questions as screening questions anyway. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Do you ever see developers reporting into PMs? And then Marco just asked a question about what's your take on companies where product management reports into tech, engineering, or operations? I'm going to touch both these questions because it's similar. I don't think I've ever seen developers report to product managers, except for the circumstances of those people being contractors, or it being like a really small company and they don't have like any engineering management roles. Outside of that, engineering, that's not that common that I see that. Most of the time they have, because it's like a lot of direct reports, and a product manager, I disagree with it too, by the way, because I can't, like, I was a developer for 2 years. I can't manage engineers. Like, it's been ages since I was a developer. So, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Contractors, maybe, yes, you can kind of manage that. But outside of that, I don't see that, and I don't agree with it either. It just doesn't make sense from my perspective. Now, on the other side, with Marco's question about companies where product management report into tech and engineering or operations, I'm a little bit okay with. That's common in smaller startups from my experience, because they often don't have a chief product officer, but they have like a chief operating officer. And especially for businesses that are, maybe more logistics, fulfillment, service style businesses, those businesses are very operations heavy. So your product and operational excellence and fulfillment and all that type of stuff have to go hand in hand together. In that case, I actually think it makes sense. If you don't want to have two separate roles because you're a small company, that's okay together. So I think that makes sense. In a larger companies, starts to make less sense unless you're still in that like fulfillment type operations industry. Now, reporting to tech and engineering, I see this in very tech-driven companies or tech-centric companies. This is usually the case when one of the founders was an engineer. They're a really tech organization born from an engineering perspective. That kind of aligns that way. I think you need to outgrow it because product and engineering and design should ultimately eventually be decoupled because there's a healthy tension between them. And engineering is a different craft to product. So if you have someone managing product people, you want product people doing that. So a good example is, if I go back to this, these people, you're going to have a gap, right? Like, because these people are then engineering managers, like the director of engineering. And my question to those people would be like, are they good at product leadership? Like, are they good at that? Are they good at product portfolio management? Are they good at product strategy? Are they good at, OKRs, that type of stuff? These are all things that these people would do. And I often find in those companies, those things are neglected. And then it's no wonder like that we have challenges, right? Because we're there's gaps. So I think ultimately you need to outgrow it, especially if you're a small company. Yeah. Shriyoshi, apologies if I say your name wrong, asked, can you please talk more about the responsibilities APMs have? Yeah. So associate product managers. So we're right up here. Right up here, talking about associate product manager as this entry level role, just to give everyone context. Now, there's nuance between like how does the company set up that associate product manager role. Now, not every company sets it up the same, but generally, or the most common that I see is that it's really like the responsibilities are the same as a product manager. The difference is the expectations are lower and the space that we're going to give that product manager is going to be much smaller. And I'll give you a tangible example. Most associate product managers aren't left on their own. Towards the end of your time as an associate product manager, you'll be independent, and we're basically testing you to see, like, can you do it on your own? But early on, you have immense support. And usually we're going to pair you with like a senior product manager or a principal, but usually we pair with a senior. And another reason for this is I want to give that senior product manager exposure to what it's like having some people management responsibility and some coaching and responsibility to coach. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give that senior product manager exposure to what it might be like as a product leader. And the reason for that is to help them make that decision. Like, do you want to be an individual contributor or do you want to be a product leader? And people also bounce between those two. So it's not like if you choose to go on one, you can't do the other. People do bounce. But early on, that senior product manager is going to be working with that associate product manager. They're going to own a product. Let's say I'm the senior product manager. I'm going to look at my product area and I'm going to be like, hey, we have this problem. Let's take like a onboarding flow, just because I like to use similar like examples like this because everyone can visualize it and everyone can understand what it means. So let's say that the onboarding flow has like, we have drop off or we're getting feedback like that. This step in the onboarding flow is not great. I would take that, not the whole product, not like the whole thing that we're responsible for. I would take that small thing and I would give it to them and I'll say, hey, if you look at the data, like, can you see this? Look at what's happening here. Like customers are dropping off. We have a big drop off. We have some, qualitative feedback, anecdotal stuff that says like that it's complex and people get frustrated or whatever. Maybe we have none of that, but I'll take them through all that and I'll say here. And again, this is all about like management and expectations and stuff. And I'll be like, I want you to go away, try and understand what's going on here. I want you to come back and let me know what you think is going on here, what your hypotheses are. And then we will work together to, I'll coach them on that. We'll pick a hypothesis. And then I want you to then, work on, and obviously they won't be doing this alone. They'll work with a team, hopefully a designer, like a product trio. And I want you to go and ideate some solutions, and then we'll talk about those solutions. And then I want you to go and implement one of those solutions. So you can see how basically they're still doing the product management role, but we've given them this really small, narrow thing. We're like, hey, this really small feature or this really small problem space, I want you to own. And you're not like on your own, like every step of the way, like we're spending time together. I'm coaching you through it. We're working together. I'm giving feedback. What about this? What about that? And we would do that. And then what I'd be trying to do is over time increase that. So 2 dials, increase the scope and responsibility. And then I also want to dial back how much involvement I have. But the responsibilities are really the same. The things I don't expect though, but expectations change. I don't expect them to be going and finding opportunities and trying to put a business case together and trying to pitch those opportunities. I don't expect them to be putting together roadmaps unless I've like asked them to do that. I don't expect them to be building a product vision or a strategy unless, again, I've specifically asked them to do that. Probably definitely not strategy, way beyond their scope and capabilities at the time. But take a vision. I might be like, come up with a vision for this feature, right? Like somebody I'm coaching right now is responsible for analytics, and we did a session where we went through coming up with a vision for product analytics. So you start to think about how AI might fit into that and all this other stuff, but you'll do something like that. Like, okay, analytics, come up with a vision for it. And again, it's the same skills, it's the same responsibilities, the scope's just a lot smaller. Just like principle, the scope's going to be much bigger, complexity is going to be much bigger. Those are the dimensions that change. So hopefully that answers the question. We could get really deep into it. In fact, actually, I'll do this. What I would recommend you do if you are really curious about getting deep into this, if you Google product management capability framework, you can find companies that publish their product management capability frameworks on the internet. That's completely open. You should be able to find like, I think GitLab does theirs, is all open. You should be able to find Intercoms as well. You should be able to, there's a few. You'll be able to find them. And then you'll be able to, if they have associate product managers, you'll be able to read line by line the skill and expectation on that skill. I would recommend doing that. Cool. We are at time. I wish I could have got deeper into this, but we would have spent like 3 hours here. But hopefully that was in itself useful. And thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I'll see you at a future one. And wherever you are, good afternoon, have a good day, a good morning, even if it's on your end, or good evening. And I'll see you at the next webinar.